For Ambassador Chris Stevens, Benghazi wasn't just another dangerous posting, it was personal. He had walked these streets after the fall of Gaddafi, shaken hands with rebels, and believed Libya still had a future worth fighting for. He knew the threats, he accepted the risks. What he couldn't know was that this night would be his last. On the night of September 11th, as darkness fell over Benghazi, hope turned into chaos, and a diplomatic compound became a battlefield. This is the chilling true story of the final hours of an American ambassador and the desperate, controversial rescue attempt that followed. John Christopher "Chris" Stevens was a born diplomat. A 21-year veteran of the Foreign Service, he had a deep love for the Middle East, something forged during his time teaching English in Morocco with the Peace Corps. Fluent in Arabic, he first arrived in Benghazi in April 2011 on a Greek cargo ship, sent as the American envoy to the rebels fighting to overthrow a dictator. He was known for taking personal risks to connect with the Libyan people, helping build the foundation for what he hoped would be a new, free nation. After the revolution, he was appointed U.S. ambassador to Libya in May 2012. He was an optimist, focusing on cultural and educational programs to restore the bond between the two countries. But Benghazi was a city on a knife's edge. While many embraced the new freedom, the power vacuum let extremist militias fester in the shadows. Security was fragile, and for months, American officials had noted the situation was deteriorating. Just a mile away from the main diplomatic compound, a second, covert U.S. facility was operating: the CIA annex. It was protected by a small elite team of former Special Operations soldiers, contractors for the CIA's Global Response Staff, or GRS. These men, including former Navy SEALs Tyrone Woods and Glen Doherty, and former Army Ranger Chris Peranto, were the last line of defense for American intelligence officers in one of the most dangerous cities on Earth. They were quiet professionals operating in the gray, their presence a secret to most. On September 10, 2012, Ambassador Stevens traveled from the capital, Tripoli, to Benghazi. He was there to open a new cultural center and reconnect with local leaders, another step in his mission of diplomacy. His diary, later found in the ruins of the compound, noted his concern about the growing al-Qaeda presence. It was a mission from which he would never return. The evening of September 11, 2012, was quiet at the U.S. Special Mission Compound. Inside, Ambassador Stevens had just finished his last meeting. With him in the main building was Sean Smith, an information management officer for the Foreign Service and a passionate online gamer known to his friends as Vile Rat. At about 9:40 p.m. local time, the calm shattered. Gunfire and explosions erupted outside the compound walls. A flood of heavily armed militants swarmed the facility, their shouts mixing with the roar of automatic weapons and rocket-propelled grenades as they quickly overran the local security guards. An urgent alert went out to the CIA annex just a mile away. The compound is under attack. The GRS team there could hear the alarms and gunfire. They immediately started grabbing their gear, ready to move. Back at the diplomatic mission, things were spiraling out of control. The few diplomatic security agents were pinned down. Ambassador Stevens, Sean Smith, and a security agent named Scott Wickland scrambled into a fortified safe room inside the main villa. But the attackers couldn't break through the room's barred gate, so they did something horrific. They flooded the building with diesel fuel and set it on fire. Thick, black, toxic smoke poured into the safe room. Gasping for air on the floor, the three were quickly separated in the blinding, choking darkness. Meanwhile, at the CIA annex, the GRS team was loaded into armored vehicles, desperate to go. But they were stopped. This moment would become one of the most controversial of the night. According to the contractors, the acting CIA base chief told them to wait, a stand-down order to hold for support from friendly Libyan militias. Official investigations have disputed whether a formal stand-down order was given. framing it as a tactical decision to gather support. For 24 agonizing minutes, the warriors argued, listening to the desperate radio calls from the compound. Finally, GRS team leader Tyrone Woods made his choice. He famously told his men, "We're going." They would defy the delay and fight their way to their fellow Americans. At 10:04 p.m., the six-man GRS team sped out of the CIA annex and into the chaos of Benghazi. They were driving into a city that had turned on them, with no way of knowing who was a friend and who was an enemy. The journey that should have taken only a few minutes turned into a running battle. They hit roadblocks and ran into hostile militias, forcing them to navigate a treacherous landscape where every shadow could hide an attacker. Their two armored vehicles pushed through the night, a tiny island of American firepower in a sea of hostility. Back at the burning compound, diplomatic security agent Scott Wickland had managed to climb out of a window, escaping the smoke-filled building. But he had lost Stevens and Smith. He made several heroic attempts to go back in, but the intense heat and suffocating smoke forced him back every time. He was on his own, fighting off the attackers swarming the grounds. Around 10:40 p.m., after battling through the city, the GRS team finally reached the compound. They stormed the entrance, their sudden and violent arrival pushing the attackers back, if only for a moment. They found the remaining security agents and began a frantic search through the burning, smoke-filled buildings, shouting the names of the missing men into the darkness. "Chris! Sean!" Their worst fears were quickly confirmed. Inside the main building, they found the body of Sean Smith. He had died from asphyxiation, but of Ambassador Stevens there was no sign. The GRS team and the surviving diplomatic staff now faced an impossible choice: keep searching a compound being consumed by fire, or get everyone they could to the relative safety of the CIA annex. At 11:30 p.m., the GRS team made the gut-wrenching call. They loaded the remaining State Department personnel and Sean Smith's body into an armored vehicle and began the dangerous retreat to the CIA annex. They had to leave Ambassador Stevens behind, a decision that would haunt them forever. They fought their way out under heavy fire, finally making it back to the annex just before midnight. Unknown to them, local Libyans had found Ambassador Stevens inside the main building. He was alive but unconscious from severe smoke inhalation. They pulled him from the wreckage and rushed him to a Benghazi hospital. For 90 minutes, doctors tried to resuscitate him, but it was too late. Ambassador Chris Stevens was pronounced dead at approximately 2 a.m. He had no visible wounds. He died from the smoke. But for the men at the annex, the night of terror wasn't over. The fight had followed them home. Just after midnight, the CIA annex itself came under attack. The first assault came with RPGs and small arms fire. For the next hour, the GRS team, now defending over 30 American personnel, held the perimeter from the rooftops, fighting off wave after wave of attackers. Team leader Tyrone Woods coordinated the defense, his voice a steady presence over the radio. The attacks continued sporadically until a little after 1 a.m., when an eerie quiet fell over the area. Some dared to hope the worst was over. At the same time, a small reinforcement team was scrambling out of Tripoli. It included Glen Doherty, another former Navy SEAL and a close friend of Tyrone Woods. After chartering a private jet, they landed in Benghazi but were stuck for hours at the airport, trying to negotiate for passage. They were a lifeline, but they were still hours away from the fight. High above, an unarmed U.S. surveillance drone watched it all unfold, providing intelligence but no firepower. The quiet didn't last. The attackers were regrouping, preparing for a more devastating assault. The GRS team used the break to treat the wounded and rearm, knowing the fight wasn't finished. At around 5 a.m., the reinforcement team from Tripoli, including Glen Doherty, finally arrived at the annex. Doherty didn't hesitate. He immediately went to the roof to help his friends, finding Tyrone Woods and another contractor holding a key defensive position. Minutes later, At approximately 5:15 a.m., the final and most lethal attack began. This time, the enemy had mortars. The first 2 rounds missed. The next 3 were brutally precise. One slammed into the roof right at Tyrone Woods' position. He was killed instantly. As Glen Doherty moved to help, another round landed, killing him as well. The 2 former Navy SEALs who had served together and were close friends died just feet from each other, defending their fellow Americans. The same blasts severely wounded diplomatic security agent David Ubben and contractor Mark Geist. It was the final, devastating blow. Shortly after the mortar attack, a large Libyan relief force arrived, and the battle was finally over. The surviving Americans, along with their fallen comrades, were evacuated to the Benghazi airport. As they prepared to leave, they saw a solemn procession. A vehicle carrying the body of Ambassador Stevens, recovered from the hospital, drove past them on the tarmac. A final, tragic reunion. In 13 chaotic hours, 4 Americans lost their lives: Ambassador Chris Stevens, Information Officer Sean Smith, and CIA security contractors Tyrone Woods and Glen Doherty. They were diplomats and warriors who died serving their country. The attack on Benghazi would become a political flashpoint in the United States, leading to years of investigations and bitter debate. But if you strip away the politics, you find a story of incredible human bravery against impossible odds. It's the story of Ambassador Stevens, who risked his life to build a better future for a country he cared for so deeply. It's the story of Sean Smith, a dedicated public servant. And it's the story of the GRS operators, men like Tyrone Woods and Glen Doherty, who ran toward the gunfire, who questioned orders to do what they knew was right, and who made the ultimate sacrifice to save their own. Their actions that night are a tragic but powerful example of courage and duty. The full story of what happened in Benghazi is complex, and the debates about it continue to this day. If this breakdown helped you understand the events of that night, consider subscribing for more deep dives into critical moments in history. We'd also like to hear your thoughts in the comments below.